Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, How Smart IT Leaders Thrive During a Recession. My name is Joel Anderson. I'm the VP of Marketing with Tier4 Advisors. Pleased to introduce today's host, Jake Sheryl, who is the founder and chairman of Tier4, along with our executive panel, our IT executive panel. I'm very grateful that they joined us. We have Tommy Meek, the VP of Enterprise Technology Solutions with Aaron's, Lisa McVey, CIO, National Christian Foundation, Andy Stewart, board member with BCM1, Kelly Higgins, Senior Vice President, Solution Architecture here at Tier4 Advisors, and Richard Dunavent, Director of IT at Kinesis. So before I hand the time over to Jake, just a few housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded, so it will be available for replay on our website and through other media formats, which we'll send your way. If you do have questions, we'd love to be able to answer those during the webinar. We will be answering them towards the end. So if you'd like to ask a question, please do so via the Q&A button that's down at the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, Jake, we'll turn the time over to you and to our panel.
Thanks so much, Joel. I want to thank all the attendees who have joined us from around the country, and thank the panel for being here as well. We want to start by introducing the group of folks that we're joined by today. And we will start with Tommy Meek, Vice President at Aaron's. Tommy, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Jake, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tommy Meek, and I'm with Aaron's. We are an omni-channel lease-to-own provider for electronics, appliances, and furniture to the underserved customer. We've got about 1,500 stores spread across the country, including Canada. And I've been with the company for about 6 years now and lead the Enterprise Technology Solutions Group.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Tommy. Kelly Higgins, Senior Vice President of Solution Architecture here at Tier4 Advisors. Kelly, say hi to the group.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Kelly Higgins. I'm the SVP of IT Solutions Architecture at Tier4 Advisors. I've been with Tier4 a little over 5 years. I most recently was with Travelport in Atlanta. Travelport led or maintains IT solutions and services for the travel industry, including large airlines like Delta Airlines, global travel agencies, suppliers of travel services, hotels, car rentals, etc. Prior to that, I was with Bell South in Atlanta, which is now AT&T. Part of that with a risk management and insurance-related services company. So all told, over 30 years of IT infrastructure services experience.
Thank you, Kelly. Lisa McVey, CIO at National Christian Foundation.
Thanks, Jake, and happy Wednesday to everybody. I have almost spent 1 year with the National Christian Foundation. And if you think about for your families and for your businesses, you have a financial strategy. National Christian Foundation is all about giving strategy. So we are your giving strategists. So when you think about those charities and the things that are close to your heart, we help you get most of your money to your charities and help with tax implications. Prior to being with National Christian Foundation, I've had a couple of other CIO positions in the Atlanta area, but I spent 21 years with McKesson Corporation. When I'm not working and spending time with my family and my pups, I love to play golf. I know some of you do as well, and I also love to deep sea fish.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Andy Stewart, board member at BCM1.
Great, thanks, Jake. Hi, everybody. So Andy Stewart, board member for BCM1. BCM1 is a network-focused MSP that happens to do a lot of business with Tier4, thankfully. Also an executive advisor for Conisus Capital Partners, a St. Louis-based middle market private equity fund that focuses in kind of high-growth founder-owned businesses. And then previously, I was both the CFO and then Chief Strategy Officer at TierPoint.
Thank you, Andy. And Richard Donovan, Director of IT.
Hey, thanks, Jake. Yeah, I oversee IT support and security for Conisus. We are kind of a niche provider of medical communications and information for the biopharmaceutical space. Prior to this, been here for just about a year, but prior to this, I oversaw IT for a large national mortgage company called Cardinal Financial, and got to see all kinds of things here that we might touch on later.
Excellent. And again, my name is Jake Sheryl. I'm the founder and chairman of Tier4 Advisors. Started the firm 7 years ago on the premise of helping IT professionals expedite and simplify the procurement process of everything data center. Hence the name Tier4 data center is better than a Tier 3 or a Tier 2. Through the years, however, we've added telecom, managed services, security, compliance, and emerging tech. So instead of publishing an RFP and managing a lot of the back and forth with anywhere from 3 to 10 different vendors, yourself or internally, we outsource and offload a lot of that time and stress and shrink project timelines from months or possibly years down to weeks or a month or two. And again, we're here to help any way we can. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Again, the title of today's webinar is How Smart IT Leaders Thrive in a Downturn. And we're going to go ahead and start with Kelly on this one. What are some examples of investment decisions you've made prior to entering a crisis or a downturn? And then we'll open up to the other panelists to share some opinions as well.
Sure. And let me a little background. There's been a number of economic downturns over the last 20 or so years, but I think back about one that sort of resembles the turmoil that we're facing today, and that was 9/11. So I had recently joined WorldSpan, which is now Travelport, and as I mentioned, supporting the travel industry. Well, you can imagine the impact that 9/11 would have there, and it certainly did. While there was grounding of flights and things around the country, the post turmoil was much harder for travel companies and others to survive. But within WorldSpan, we were focused on a number of IT innovation projects and initiatives, but we had to really reprioritize and look at ways to cut costs, to simplify operations. And could we do that through any modernization without spending lots of money? So we looked at those areas. We were a huge cartridge tape shop, and so we looked at ways that we could offload that process into newer technology. If we had DRaaS and backup as a service type environments like we have today, that would have been a great option. We looked at transitioning legacy network protocols to something called TCP/IP, which is just up and coming. So if we had things like SD-WAN or other networking technologies, we certainly would take advantage of those. But I think the message is that we had to reshift priorities and look at those operational optimization opportunities.
Excellent. Anything else from the panelists on that one? Lisa, next one, we'll start with you. What methods do you use to reprioritize projects you're working on in times like these?
That's a really interesting question, because typically when you're looking at prioritizing projects anyway, you're looking at the impact for your customers and the value and the benefits you're giving them. What's the reach? What's the business impact? What's the effort? What's the confidence level you're going to achieve them? Quite frankly, all of those are the same types of things you need to think of today. We are going through right now a major technology transformation. We started about 18 months ago, and we have about another 2 years to go, related to putting in all new applications to support the business and put together a foundation. We are also really right now looking at, how do we make that investment and how do we continue to fund that through 2021? In conversations today, we're not so worried about, well, we are. We're all going through our budgets. We're looking at what expenses can we reduce, so that we can minimize our impact on our employees and their benefits, et cetera. But we also think now's the time to dig in and innovate, And so we're looking at ways that we can do things differently. I can also think about an area, Jake, where I engaged Tier4. I had a whole bunch of projects on the plate. They were already approved by a previous board and a previous CIO. They had taken all the projects and, turned them into like really small projects, and they were going to feed them out to various different partners. And when I came in, I looked at them, and there were a lot of projects that really should have been combined together. And I think our partners would have preferred to have a bigger chunk of, the project. So Tier 4 came in and helped us look at everything from security to infrastructure to all the various projects, SD-WAN, those kinds of things. And, I was grateful to have Tier 4 as a partner in that process.
Thank you, Lisa. Next one, we'll go ahead and give it over to Tommy. Tommy, obviously a lot of things are changing with, everything that we're dealing with right now, but how has the role of an IT leader changed in, recent weeks, maybe the last month and a half, and where do you see that going maybe for the short term and then maybe the next, year or two?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll step back a little bit further back. We've worked hard as an organization to be better business partners with the rest of the business. In fact, part of our purpose statement of the organization is to become ultimate partners. So we want to work hand in hand with them, be part of the solution and providing the technology services to kind of to further drive business value. And that's been more magnified, more than ever here in recent weeks. So the other thing I want to mention too is everybody in the technology organization refers to our business partners as the rest of the business to help send that message that we're on the same team, rather than being, us versus them, that approach. So, having to adapt to the current COVID-19 situation has really thrust the technology organization into the middle of it. I mean, having to, more is being asked of us. We're more visibility, the network architecture, having to deliver more, and the ability for folks to work remotely is really, something that the rest of the business took for granted in previous months and years, and now they're super interested in it. So, I like to refer to as in the past, the IT organization's been seen as more the umpires and referees, whereas you only notice this if something went wrong. Whereas now we're like to refer to ourselves as the technology organization and actually be a part of the team.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how things are changing, right? And the different priorities that are taking place in businesses, especially when issues take place. So we are definitely front and center, more so now than ever. Andy, question 4, we'll go ahead and kick off with you again. Other panelists, feel free to chime in if you have other ideas or want to share some different opinions. But, overall, when you see a crisis or downturn, might be imminent, how soon should you start, maybe modifying the technology within your company, the strategies, the projects, really the whole landscape?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we don't see crises coming, and we kind of end up in them or in a downturn, like both at 9/11, the financial crisis, and today, unfortunately. And the answer is right away. Some of the panelists have talked about kind of reprioritizing projects. IT has been supporting a lot of growth the last 5 years, and now it has to kind of shift gears and think about ways to really reduce costs for the entire organization. And some of those can be done with technology changes, really moving as many things as possible to kind of as a service, shifting away from big CapEx purchases, from things that you were hoping might drive some growth. In this environment, you're not going to be seeing that. So the push to really change out technologies that can really help reduce costs for the organization or allow remote workforce to be more productive. I think it's an opportunity for the IT organization to really drive some cost savings throughout the entire business.
Yeah, Jake, I would chime in and say that it's an opportunity to look at your business continuity and DR plans, et cetera. We had a similar session last week. Would invite others to revisit that webinar recording, but it talks about focus on business continuity. It's not all about sending backups offsite or anything. It's what are you going to do with those employees, as Tommy and Andy said, when everybody's got to work from home. They may not be prepared for that technology. So brings up a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, have you chime in on this one? How does IT leadership shift, their resources to maintain the bottom line? And what would you share in that?
Sure. While thankfully the market downturn and the current situation has not affected our company not nearly as much as others right now, I'm very happy to say that for the time being. I will say that I have experienced similar situations, maybe not such a widespread pandemic in this nature or the level of downturn that the market has seen now, but working for the mortgage company that I referenced earlier, market shifts up and down all the time. It's not even a monthly thing or a quarterly thing. It's a daily, weekly thing. So I've seen it several times to where, you know, you may have multiple open positions that you need to be filling that you've been trying to fill, and all of a sudden you can't. So then what do you do? Oftentimes it means that maybe a more senior tech or somebody on your team has to fill a position for some of the lower level stuff and kind of jump in and fill the void or the gap. Other times it means a good opportunity for somebody smaller, somebody younger to step up in their role, pay it forward, so to speak, during that time, and be able to save that cost of adding extra heads. But the hard lesson learned is definitely not run with a fat staff or a heavy staff to begin with if you can keep from it. So you can save yourself from having to make those hard decisions if the time does come. But another big lesson is definitely automate as much as you can, especially whenever it involves a repeatable process, something that it doesn't necessarily require a human to do over and over again. If you can keep from it, that definitely saves the bottom line.
Yeah, and I think you might agree with this, Richard. You know, in times like these, it gives us all an opportunity to, you know, evaluate what we're getting out of different spend buckets, right? And, you know, what type of value, you know, vendors, partners, employees, teams are you know, adding or bringing. Sometimes it's a tough conversation to have, but, you know, when times are really good, oftentimes there's not necessarily much of a microscope on, you know, maybe spend in certain categories. But when times are like these, obviously every single penny is being looked at.
Right. Yeah. I'll say also that it oftentimes doesn't mean something bad. It doesn't have to mean something bad when it comes down to that. Sometimes, like you said, it allows you to kind of put a magnifying glass on what's going on and actually evaluate the people that you currently do have and actually find a better position or a role or spot for them that maybe they didn't even realize that they'd be good at. I have seen that happen as well.
Lisa, in your experience, how does an IT leader, you know, retain talent during a downturn? You know, sometimes we as leaders have to, we are the messenger, if you will, right? And sometimes folks are asked to take pay cuts. Sometimes folks are asked to work less, which is a pay cut, or furloughed or things like that. How have you seen, or how have you personally retain talent during a downturn?
That's a great question. I think it's a time for us to get creative, right? I would start off with sharing the current situation with NCF. And I think all of us would agree, within our entire IT organization, we have multiple teams, right? We have an application team, we have a BI team, we have a security team, we have an infrastructure team, we have a network team, and we all kind of have our own little subcultures within that. And for this particular time, we use this as an opportunity to come together as one team. And when we were forced to try to figure out how to be able to allow people to work remote, you know, we weren't in a position. We didn't have an IC, you know, BCDR plan, right? So we had to quickly come up with one. And thankfully, we had some infrastructure that allowed us to deploy things to the desktops pretty quick. But the team, you know, the heavy lift was on the infrastructure and the network team and the support desk. And so this allowed the application folks to get in and continue to do additional training, take on more of the cases, work more collectively and cohesively. So I saw a team come together, quite frankly, that I've been hoping for and waiting for the impetus to make that happen. I saw them come together in 2 weeks. I think the other thing is, now's the time that you want to keep them engaged. You want to communicate with them frequently. You want to be open and honest, more so than you ever are. You know, you want to, you know, make sure that you're telling them the reality of the situation, but also making sure that they feel safe. you want to give them the opportunity to cross-train, right? And so we're teaching people different things. And so we want to continue with that knowledge and the training. And, you know, the other thing at the end of the day is, you know, we're trying to do everything we can to take care of our employees and, again, the benefits. And even though we're looking at costs, you know, looking at them, we're still going to spend money on technology because it is what is enabling us to be in the situation we are today. And I think the biggest thing that I try to ask the team every day is, how can I help them? You know, what can I do to help them as they get through the day and through the week?
That's a great point. I was on a call, and over the years, Tier 4 has become a national brand, as some of you might know. And just earlier this morning, I was on a call with our entire company nationwide. And, you know, one of the questions that I find myself asking almost subconsciously, but on all these calls, is how can I help you? And not to toot my own horn as a leader per se, but I think all of us as leaders, you know, the more we're asking our folks how we can help them in times like these, you know, obviously the better. You know, I find this interesting. You know, a few weeks ago, and you saw the stocks affected by it as well, but, you know, people that had never even heard of Zoom were using Zoom. You know, bringing up Zoom, you know, posting stuff on Facebook, pictures of them talking with their, you know, grandparents in a retirement community or facility, you know, across the board. And it's interesting to see the adoption of new technologies in times like these. Tommy, I guess we'll shoot this one your way, but, you know, what are some new technologies you're seeing that show, you know, the most promise to help your organization, you know, succeed in the short term, and then maybe even the long term with, you know, this current pandemic?
Yeah, you actually stole my thunder there, Jake, because I was going to mention Zoom and Teams and WebEx and that. I mean, obviously it's not new technology, but I mean, just the impact that it's made over the past 4 to 5 weeks it's been amazing. You know, I fully expect in the short term that it will continue to increase the collaboration, like Lisa mentioned, and in the communication. But long term, I think it's going to change the culture as a whole, right? So it'll allow us to reevaluate real estate strategies and, you know, the office situation. I could totally see a scenario where even when we get back into the office, that those, you know, large meetings in a single conference room are done via Zoom or Teams. So I mean, I think things are going to change. It's going to be a long time before we get back to the way it was before, even if that happens. So, you know, I do remember right before this hit, walking into a conversation with one of the executives that said, "There's no way we can't work remotely. We can't be productive. It's just, you know, we're wasting our money." And now I believe that conversation is very different, and I would see that on any given day, a large percentage of our staff being remote.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? In times like these, it's a bit of a science experiment, for lack of a better term, and certainly there are better terms out there, but it's a bit of an experiment for companies, executives who used to use the words never and remote work in the same sentence.
Yeah.
And now have been forced to accept it and forced to give it a try, right? And I think we're all in the same experiment to, you know, basically decide or prove out the model of, you know, do we even really need the same type of office space or office scenario, again, for lack of a better term, as we're used to historically. Kelly, did you have something to chime in on?
Yeah, and I was going to say, you know, Zoom is great. They're a partner of Tier 4, but there's also other, you know, enterprise-worthy solutions for unified communications and video, et cetera. So take that in mind. But, you know, you can't take your eye off the ball from a security perspective. Hackers never sleep. So that's one thing that comes to my mind, too, that taking advantage of you know, a security evaluation during this period and making sure that you're locked down, particularly as employees are spread out, you know, remote working. It does tend to open up additional holes if you don't have things set up correctly. So that's another area that we could help you with and have helped many companies with from a security service. going hand in hand
Well,
with unified communications would be even potentially, SD-WAN tools that help clients simplify the operation of a network and more touchless environments. So that's where I see things going. Is what if your network guy cannot get into a building to do things? Well, maybe that gear needs to reside in a managed service environment. And so those are things I think that will change.
Hey, Jake, I was going to add one more thing if I could, because
Please.
outside of what Kelly mentioned related to security and what Tommy mentioned related to all of the collaboration tools, the one situation I found myself in, we were heavily reliant on our desk phones. And we needed to be able to leverage truly our UCaaS solution. And even though we had implemented some of the components, we had not fully implemented the solution to be able to take advantage of being able to have it on the laptop, your soft phone on the laptop. And so I think that really helped our business, was having that UCaaS solution.
That's great. And if you're driving to the grocery store or going to the doctor or whatever, obviously you're out and about. I've noticed that, it seems like more road construction is getting done faster. It seems like certain projects that would normally take, weeks or months from a, infrastructure perspective, construction perspective, are actually happening relatively quick right now, because the obvious reasons, I would imagine they don't have to worry about, closing roads or the traffic, these types of things. From an IT perspective, are there any projects out there? Are there any targets out there that in a time like this, we should be taking advantage of versus, maybe delaying or having different project timelines internally? Are there any ideas there that you've seen either in your organization or other organizations that they're doing now because of this opportunity?
I'll take it from my perspective, and we've touched on it already. It's the as a service environments. So again, if you have remote employees, they need to be able to manage environments easy enough. Engineers and administrators need to have the tools, and the as a service provides those avenues, I think, better than being on site in most cases. So look at the unified communications as a service, the SD-WAN, even desktop as a service, also known as VDI. So those could be opportunities to get away from the management of a personal computer, et cetera.
Yeah, perfect. Andy, just kind of continuing the conversation here. I mean, how do you successfully maintain the balance of your CapEx and OpEx budgets in times like this? And how do you start that conversation maybe with some of the superiors that some of our folks might be, reporting to?
Yeah, so I think it's important. So thinking about it from the board perspective, or even from how the CEO might, cash is always important, but in a downturn, cash is king. And I don't think it's a matter of trying to balance CapEx versus OpEx. I think it's a matter of how can I retain as much cash on my balance sheet and shift, as we've been talking about, to as many things as a service. So if my employee base is shrinking, I can reduce costs kind of appropriately. Now is not the time to be making $1 million investments in servers or new equipment. It's start using different providers out there that can really help you manage your costs on a per user basis. I think again, recessions are hammer home how important cash is for Concentrate, our portfolio. The 26 companies, that the advice we've given them and their CEOs is to stockpile and hold as much cash as you can. That doesn't always mean cutting costs, but it means changing how you run your business to make sure that we have cash if things get worse.
Excellent. And certainly we don't need to get too nosy here, but for the panelists, what are some immediate challenges? I guess Richard, we'll start with you on this one, but immediate challenges that you're facing right now. What are you doing to address them with your team's assistance? Anything out there that you're seeing that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, sure. So the nature of our business is largely in-person events and speaker engagements. So with all of this going on, of course, no one's able to hold those events or be in person or be live at these events. And so everything has had to shift to virtual events, much like this, but a little different. We've actually partnered with, and we've done this throughout the years for various needs, but we partner with various third-party services that provide like a white glove experience or service in the back end for this. Maybe provide a little bit more of an overlay of branding or whatever it is that maybe the client needs or requests from us. So that's kind of what we've been doing internally. The teams have been kind of evaluating some of these services and taking a look at what they like versus don't like. And anything else internally, of course, is fully on platforms like this, fully UCaaS. Thankfully, I was able to get the company shifted from an on-premise phone system and environment that was very on-premise focused last year to everything cloud-based in that respect, to where we don't have to have an office location to do the job. And so that made this discussion a lot easier when it came down to, oh no, what do we do? It was, well, why don't we do what we're currently doing? It's working. And so that made that a lot easier.
Tommy or Lisa, any other, challenges that you might want to share that you're facing today and what you've done to address those?
Yeah, I think our challenges have been around stores, right? Like I said earlier, we've got 1,500 stores, and being able to quickly adapt and provide a solution for if a store is in an impacted area, or due to government regulation, have to operate a little differently, and being able to provide the technology capabilities for them to be able to maintain, business operation. So we got real creative with that, and we have the flexibility, whether it's move that functionality to another store or do it remotely. We've had some good success there.
Yeah, and I would add, at the National Christian Foundation, even though we're headquartered here in Alpharetta, Georgia, we have approximately 30 affiliates that are across the United States. So we have folks that are actually in their local communities, helping to raise money to give to those on the front line. So we're sitting back looking at what can we do to continue to help supporting those local offices that are in these communities each community is facing something different today. Given what's going on in their state. So we're stepping back, figuring out how can we provide additional technology to our local offices, because they're not really our employees, they're affiliates, right? So we haven't continued to always support them, and we're looking at better ways to support them. The other thing we're looking at, as Andy mentioned, as you were talking about CapEx and OpEx, is the multiple ways that we can make sure that we've got the funding needed, because we are a nonprofit. So what are the multiple ways that we can have the funding needed so that we can continue to do our transformation projects, continue to run the business, but make sure that we are, cash whole, right? So just like with other businesses, there's the SBA loans, there's the PPP loans for, nonprofits. So we're looking at, do we want to do a capital, push and go get and raise capital? Do we want to keep our cash revenue? Obviously we do. And then do we want to apply for the PPP loan, which allows us to have multiple strategies, to keep the business whole. And, oh, by the way, we don't have to use the loan. We can always give it back. So we're in one of those, how do we balance the financial situation?
Yeah, it's interesting. All companies are in that same spot, right? And, when you talk about the PPP, for example, hearing from others, having a bill that size pass that fast is one thing. Having the application process, crashes and things like that. And then speaking with some of the bankers actually that are managing that process, you're talking about tens of thousands of applications, and each application taking anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes to process. Some of these banks just simply weren't staffed to handle that load. It's an interesting spot that we find ourselves. Andy, you're a board member. You see a lot of different companies, financials, things like that. I'm gonna throw a little bit of a curveball at you if you don't mind. But with regards to the PPP, I mean, do you think that 100% or 98% of the companies out there are filing for this? And if you do you think that's enough? Or will there be more legislation down the road? Kind of putting you on the spot a little bit here, not trying to get political, but what are your thoughts, and what do you see some of the companies that are in the portfolio of Thompson Street doing?
We've been filing, and different stages in terms of approval, but it is I think that's the advice we're giving the portfolio, is to apply if they can, get the funds, maintain the employee base as best we can, and kind of live to fight another day. Not really sure how things are going to shake out. I would imagine more legislation is going to happen. We saw the $25 billion bailout for the airlines, and I don't think people appreciate kind of the domino effect this is going to have. Even when things start opening up again in May or June, there are going to be a lot of businesses that aren't going to be able to make it, regardless of what additional legislation may pass. It's going to affect a lot of businesses in the MSP space that might have too much revenue concentration in one vertical. BCM1, thankfully, we're in great shape, but I think it is going to result in, thinking about IT and partners, it's going to result in some of these businesses going under. So I think it's really important to pick the best partners, both from delivery, but also the ones that are really financially capable today and in the future.
And again, to continue double down on that topic, I mean, obviously you have different types of companies in your portfolio. You got, companies that are MSPs, data centers, so on and so forth. Are you seeing some of those companies still invest in a growth strategy, essentially, employing folks that are out hunting and trying to grow the business? Or does the opinion of live to fight another day mean, cut early and often, keep as much, cash as you can, and, maybe rehire for those positions down the road? I mean, is there a one answer, or is it depends?
I think it really depends. So we actually, BCM, we closed an acquisition, and that was a business that we had under LOI, and really, enhanced our growth strategy. We think it's kind of core to our thesis, and moved ahead with that. On the flip side, looking at new platform businesses, I think, broadly, you've seen private equity firms pull back from making new platform investments, and that's partially because of just the craziness of the situation and trying to understand, again, the ripple effects within those companies, but also banks aren't eager to loan, new money to right now. The banking it's not shut off, it is significantly reduced. So I think new investments, everybody's being pretty cautious with, but it depends on the underlying business. We have one portfolio company, healthcare processing, and we can't invest fast enough in that business. It's just so active and growing. So it really depends.
Yeah, that's fair. We had a question come in from one of our attendees, and Lisa, Tommy, or Richard, I'll go ahead and let you choose who wants to start here, but how has your communication with the rest of the C-suite changed during this COVID-19 pandemic? If it has.
I'll go ahead and take it. I'll say it's increased. I think it's important to kind of keep tabs with everyone. Number one, everyone set a distance. So you're going to have to either speak or see each other a little bit more frequently at times than maybe what you would, normally otherwise expect being in the office. But that's not a bad thing. It's great to be informed or be able to inform the others. And so I think this time, I won't call it downtime. I think, oftentimes most of us here are probably more busy now than what we've been in months. At least I can say that for myself. And I think that's just also the season. But the bottom line is that, it provides a good opportunity to getting things done that otherwise you wouldn't be able to through that level of communication.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the communication and visibility both have increased dramatically, and just the overall reliance on technology as a whole is just, shot through the roof. So.
And with that communication, is there any documentation or information that you're relaying to the executive team, or any questions that you're being asked repeatedly on anything in particular?
Not so much repeated questions. I do think there's an area of opportunity to to provide more metrics. I know that's an area that will, now that we have kind of gotten through the initial, keep things afloat, everybody running around like crazy. Getting a little bit more formal with some of the metrics and showing how we're doing, the situation.
Yeah.
And Jake, I would add that I would ditto everything that they've said around the conversations around the C-suite, are a little bit more focused on technology in the fact that we're being more innovative right now. The communications that I've had that have opened up has been with our board. They're very, very interested in what we're going to continue to do to innovate, and what we're going to continue to moving our transformation project through. They've also had an awful lot of questions about security, right? So what's our security posture, and what are we doing to protect? We've had, not our company, but a company that we have a board member that is on their board that was actually attacked by ransomware. So that initiated a lot of conversation around what we're doing to protect ourselves.
Andy, do you have anything kind of flipping the coin here from the C-suite or the board? Is there any communication that you see that you guys are asking for more during this pandemic?
With our board, we have go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say a lot more just daily communication with the portfolio companies, and it's on a few fronts. One is make sure that they're communicating with their employees, so that the entire company knows what's going on, that there's a sense of unity, that we're kind of in it together. And then also just things keep on changing so fast from day to day, that we have a kind of a real-time sense for what's going on in the business. And that's different than it used to be. It was either once a week or even monthly kind of updates. So the frequency is much greater. And then we are asking for daily tracking of different things as well, in particular cash receivables. So how much, what bills are getting paid, what invoices are getting paid by our clients, and how does that compare versus March or March or February or January, so that we really have a sense, again, on a daily basis, if we're collecting as we think we are, or are we going to kind of, do we start seeing some slippage with a few customers? So it is a very different way of communicating with the portfolio than in the past.
Another question that came in is, will this pandemic change business protocols and procedures permanently? And I think what they're also adding in is, do we still see our companies needing an office? And if so, is it still going to be a 50,000 square foot office, or will that, shrink over time down to a 20,000 square foot office because more people are working remotely? Thoughts on, will people still be shaking hands? Or is this going to turn into, we might just wave to each other? Tommy, you're off mute. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is, I think the short answer is yes, things will change. But the thing I'm most excited about is when things get back to normal, the ability to, it's hard enough to keep or to find good talent. And I think this really, truly opens the door to recruit from anywhere in the world, right? So no longer are you looking in Metro Atlanta or St. Louis area. You're looking in, the West Coast, all over the world to be able to find that. I think that's going to be, great for every technology organization.
I'm gonna disagree a little bit on that. And not that things aren't going to change, because they certainly will. And if we need to be in the office, we won't be in the office quite so much. But there's this concept of collaborative efficiency, in that if you are having a group trying to solve a problem, that it's, one, incredibly inefficient to try to do over email. two, you can't really do it very well over Ring Central or Zoom calls either, because you miss nuance, you miss subtleties of expression. And I think as a result, it becomes much less efficient to solve complex problems. When I was at TierPoint, we had a very remote workforce trying to solve managed services problems for our customers. We had a guy living in a van in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but he was a network rock star, and other people throughout the country. And we had to change that. We had to get people in the office when it relates to kind of triage of complex problems. So yes, there'll be changes, but certain things I think do require still kind of in-person interaction, and we're a lot better and more efficient that way. And frankly, I like it better that way too. So I think it's going to be a mix, but I'm not ready to kind of predict the end of offices and everything kind of going to home.
So we're not able to pack up, move to the beach, and run the business from there. Is that what you're saying,
Yeah.
Kelly?
Yeah, and I would tag on to what Andy said. We've seen clients say, let's put something on hold, a project on hold, et cetera, until we can all meet face to face. So that goes to what he's saying.
Richard, Lisa, anything else to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I'll also add, I've having worked every day for several years remote and used actually this platform every single day, dozens and dozens of times a day to accomplish things. Some things that are very small, other things that are very complex, as Andy was describing. It does make it very challenging for the complex issues when you don't have those subtleties. It's the subtleties that often make a big difference in the project or the key initiative, whatever it is, that the communication is lost. What someone was looking to do isn't actually not what happens at times. So I will say getting back into a physical environment has been very big for that as far as IT goes.
Selfishly, we want everybody to do as a service.
I mean, all joking aside, the opportunities are there, right, to really transform the way business has been done historically. And, when I started this business, I still remember a half dozen or so meetings that I met with directors up to VPs or, C-level executives that truly used the words never and cloud in the same sentence. And that was 7-8 years ago. And the words never and cloud in the same sentence referring to the fact that they will never be using the cloud as a company. And here we are in 2020, arguably stating that if those businesses are not using some form or fashion of the cloud, whether that's, collaboration, or some other form of cloud right now, they're struggling mightily, I think we could probably suggest. So things do change. I would agree that, I think that there's definitely some value in person. I think we all agree in that. I think that there's also some value, especially in recruiting, maintaining talent and things by offering some remote work capabilities where that's suitable. We are a couple minutes over our time frame. We want to thank sincerely all the panelists. And with that said, I'm getting the hook from our VP of Marketing, Joel Anderson. Joel, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Joel, take it away.
Thanks, Jake. And thank you to our panelists. That truly was a great discussion. Very relevant topic and great answers that that our network is greatly appreciated. If anyone has any additional questions for our panelists, or if you're a Tier 4 team member, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to be able to facilitate any further conversation and help with any projects that you're working on. We will see you next week, 2 p.m. Wednesday, for another upcoming webinar around cost optimization and how to navigate some other additional disruptive events, such as a merger and acquisition, change in leadership, moving offices, a lot of different things that can come an IT leader's way that can throw a wrench in things. So appreciate your time today, and we will see you next week. Thank you all.